So this is our second video segment covering equilibrium in the demand and supply model. And just to refresh from where we were last time around, equilibrium occurs in the supply and demand model when quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. And we talk about the equilibrium price is the price that causes quantity demanded to equal quantity supplied. We can look at this graphically as where the two curves meet. So these two curves meet here in the neighborhood of the low 40s. $42 would be one equilibrium price in this example. And the reason why it's an equilibrium, again, is at a price of $42, we can see that quantity supplied equals quantity demanded because the demand and the supply curves meet at that place. They both have the same quantity. At a higher than equilibrium price, we would have a relatively low quantity demanded and a relatively high quantity supplied. So we would have a surplus of unsold goods. That surplus would put downward pressure on prices. That would cause quantity demanded to grow because the lower prices would encourage people to buy, and it would cause quantity supplied to fall because some suppliers would find it no longer profitable to supply at that lower price. So eventually we would get to a situation where quantity supplied equaled quantity demanded. If we started with a low price, we would have relatively few willing suppliers, but we would have a lot of people who would want to buy at that price. So we would have a shortage of goods, and that shortage would put upward pressure on prices till we got back to that equilibrium price. So again, where these two curves meet, the price where these two curves meet is the equilibrium price. The quantity where these two curves meet is the equilibrium quantity, and we go ahead and identify that equilibrium. So in Chapter 3, we also covered the concept of consumer and producer surplus and the idea here is that consumer surplus measures the net benefit that consumers get from participating in the market, and consumer surplus is the consumer's willingness to pay minus the price they did pay. So we might go ahead and say, well, what is consumer surplus in equilibrium? So when this market has finally settled down and come to its state of rest, what is consumer surplus, which is how we measure consumer welfare? We're going to see here that we can calculate this by looking at who the willing buyers are, and at a price of $42, our willing buyers were Cody, Dennis, and Epple, and each of them gets a different level of satisfaction or welfare from participating in the market. Cody, with a relatively low willingness to pay of $50, we subtract off how much he actually paid for the tickets, $42, and we get Cody's consumer surplus, or the net benefits of participating in the market for Cody. We assign a value of $8. Dennis, who values the goods more highly at $60, we subtract off the $42 that Dennis actually did pay, and we get $18 of consumer surplus. And finally, Epple, 70 minus 42 gives us 28. For the consumers as a whole then, total consumer surplus is 8 plus 18 plus 28, and that gets us to 54. And so you can go through a similar calculation to get producer surplus. So first you're going to identify which sellers or producers are willing to sell at the equilibrium price of $42, and then calculate producer surplus for each of those willing sellers, and then finally add up the producer surplus that each of the sellers is able to earn. What we're going to see here is that in a well-functioning competitive market, and that's an important caveat, in a well-functioning competitive market, the market equilibrium maximizes the gains from trade. And the reason for this is that all the highest value-adding trades take place and no value-destroying trades take place. And I'm going to go ahead and flip back a couple of slides to show how this works. So, in equilibrium, who is going to participate? We saw that it's going to be Cody, Dennis, and Epple because they are all willing to pay over $42. And who's going to sell? We're going to go ahead and see that Molly, Nico, and Reed are going to be our willing sellers because they all have seller costs that are below $42, so they can all sell profitably at a price of $42. For a moment, sort of imagine that you are the economic planner of this society. And if you only were able to arrange one trade, if you were sort of the matchmaker, what trade would you arrange to maximize the gains from trade? Well, the highest value-adding trade would be to hook up the person with the highest willingness to pay with the person with the lowest seller cost, because it's that gap between what one person values the goods at and how much it costs another person to provide the goods that creates the gains from trade. So if we hook Epple up with Reed, we're getting the goods to someone who values them at 70 from someone who had a cost to supply of 15. So the gains from that trade are 70 minus 15. So there's $55 worth of gains created by that trade. If we were allowed to have two trades, we would do that trade between Epple and Reed, and then we would also go to our second highest willingness to pay and our second lowest seller costs. So we would go ahead and hook Dennis up with Nico, and that trade would create $60 minus 25 because we would be having someone incur costs of $25 and someone else would value the good at $60. So the net benefits are again 60 minus 25, or $35 worth of benefits from arranging that trade. If we had three trades that we were able to arrange, we would do these two down here, and then we would hook up Cody and Molly, and we would be able to create $15 worth of gains because someone valued that good at $50 and it cost someone else $35 to supply it, so we'd create $15 worth of net benefits. If we were able to arrange four trades, would we want to? Well, actually no, because to create this good or supply this good would have costs of 45, but someone else would only value the good at 40. So it would actually not be beneficial to go on to this fourth trade or to go on to this fifth trade up here, because those would be value destroying trades. So again, these three trades where someone values the good more than someone else has a cost to supply the good, those are all value creating or wealth creating trades. But these trades up here, Allison and Carrie or Brittany and Linda, these are value destroying trades. And we see that exactly what happens in equilibrium is that these bottom three trades happen and the top two trades don't. So that's why we say all the value creating trades happen and none of the value destroying trades happen. Notice also that what happens is the ultimate consumers of the goods are the three people with the highest willingness to pay, the highest value that they place on the goods. The people who supply are the people who have the lowest seller costs and can supply the goods most efficiently. So that's why we're going to go ahead and see that in equilibrium, as it says here, all the highest value-adding trades take place, no value-destroying trades take place, the goods are consumed by those who value them most, as measured by their willingness to pay. As a sort of sidebar, remember that willingness to pay is influenced by income, and generally speaking, people with higher incomes are going to have higher willingness to pay. So we want to be a little bit cautious over being super optimistic about what this means. And goods are supplied by those who can do so at the lowest cost. Also, we want to be a little bit careful there. The lowest cost producer may be someone who is lowest cost because they're a big giant firm or something like that. So we're not really talking about fairness in this slide. When we talk about maximizing the gains of trade, we're not talking about fairness. We're just talking about maximizing the gains from trade. So although this slide has a lot of great things to say about the market equilibrium, we want to make sure we're careful and we don't take it to mean more than it actually does.